So yesterday we chatted about the running back tiers. Today we're going with the wide receivers, ladies and gentlemen, fellas. Let's go through my top wide receiver tiers. It takes us out to 51 of my ranked wide receivers, and we'll break them down by tiers. If you haven't watched the running back one, check it out after this one. What the tiers basically are is it groups players together based on how I view them. Similar projections for this year, and then after that, it's going to jump them down into a separate tier if there's a gap in projection for me. And that's also going to take into account not just their median projection, but their floor and ceiling outcomes. Their range of outcomes is what those tiers are. So if a player is grouped in similar tiers, it means that the last player in that tier can easily be at the top if they hit their ceiling or their higher end of their average outcome, and vice versa if it's going to be the floor. So we can start this up right away with my first tier, and you can see it. If you like this video at any point, please do take a second, hit the like button. My first tier has 6 wide receivers, and it's very close for me based on the projection to put just 5 here. You can see them on the screen: Adams, Hill, Diggs, Hopkins, Ridley, and Metcalf. And now in this tier, there is some concerns for me for Metcalf, but he is my clear wide receiver 6, and he does get the nod into this tier just slightly in my projections, but you could easily tell me that you think he's wide receiver 10, that the second half of his year last year was not like the first half, and vice versa for Tyler Lockett on his own team. But they don't have much depth on the Seattle team. I do think that I have a massive yardage season implied, especially with the downfield end zone usage for DK Metcalf. Ridley is the main guy I want to talk about here. I mean, Adams is the clear number 1 for me, on over 42% red zone target share, led the NFL in target share and routes run. He had not only all the volume, but he was the most efficient player, even with the most volume, which is so hard. I mean, it seems almost impossible to do in the NFL. And then you get Ridley at wide receiver 5, who's pushing wide receiver 4 at Hopkins, who I think could be this year's Devontae Adams from the standpoint of, I know they win in different ways. I know that Adams is a good yards after the catch monster. He's efficient. He's a different build in terms of route running than Ridley, but I mean by wide receiver 1. And that's because I think Ridley could see a 30% target share, but Julio's gone. Oh, everybody's going to double team Ridley. No, that's the most amateur and elementary comeback that people use for me, whether it's on TikTok or YouTube or in any conversation. In today's NFL, wide receivers don't get double teamed. Oh, but they were double teaming Julio last year. No, they weren't. He was double teamed on less than 5 snaps. 3 snaps to be exact, right? And Julio missed time last year, and with the number 1 cornerback for most of the year, Ridley faced the number 1 cornerbacks on the opposing teams every single week after week 3. Jair Alexander shut him down for a goose egg. He left that game with an injury as well. Alexander also last year PFF's number 1 rated quarterback, so what are you going to do? Best versus the best there. But don't get it twisted. Other teams viewed Ridley as the wide receiver 1 last year over Julio based on how they schemed them. Kyle Pitts in the middle of the field, isn't he going to take away production? Yeah, I mean, he'll just take Julio's what's left from what he had, right? I don't think Ridley is going to be too concerned about the 600 to 700 yards Pitts will have in the middle of the field. Ridley a clear top 5 receiver, but I think his ceiling is definitely wide receiver 1. So those are the top 6, and we can get into tier 2, and this is a big tier. Like tier 2 and tier 3 might even be the same tier for me. So wide receivers 7 through 15 I have in a similar tier. But if you really wanted to go wide receivers 7 through honestly like 40, yeah, they could all be the same guy, to be completely honest with you. But to at least try and tier it off in some regards to make it easier to draft, and I use these tiers during the draft. You can get them down below if you want to. Limited time offer for free through the Supreme Draft Guide. You can see how you can get that. There's a video that explains the ways to get the draft guide, but it's got these tiers. It's got, I like to draft up the tiers personally, the top 200s, the rankings, a bunch of other stuff in there. You can check it all out, help you dominate your drafts. But in this tier, it goes 7 through 15. It starts with Keenan Allen, who very quietly had the 2nd highest targets per game. He missed some time, and he left the game early, so that's included in there. 10.5 targets per game after leaving 1 game in the first half, was only behind Devontae Adams' 10.6 targets per game. Justin Fields heading into year 2, healthy Mike Williams to take attention away. I think you're going to see a big year for Keenan Allen, who also saw a 25+% red zone target share. You slide down, and there's Terry McLaurin, who some people have him as like wide receiver 12. The concerns for McLaurin are surely if Fitzpatrick is not who he was last year, which was a solid quarterback, a top 15 quarterback based on his numbers in the NFL. But if he falls back to being the Ryan Fitzpatrick who throws 3 picks in this YOLO ball, which honestly will help the fantasy production of McLaurin, but then there's concerns if Taylor Heineke is the guy who starts to take over. So that is the risk of Terry McLaurin. But in terms of route running, he's borderline a top 5 route runner in this league. He's getting there already, Terry McLaurin. He's that good. Amari's my number 9. I know he hasn't been practicing, but they said if there was a game, he could be playing this weekend. And I get all the CeeDee Lamb hype. Trust me, you can see CeeDee Lamb at number 13 here as we talk about the Dallas receivers. I just like Amari more. He's the more proven guy. He is Dak's main go-to guy. I think that CeeDee Lamb might be, at the end of this year, the better receiver on this team. I'm not too sure right now. I know all the hype wants to put CeeDee Lamb as the better receiver. He's younger. He might be more athletic. They're going to put him on the outside more. I get all that, but I think Amari's been pretty stable when healthy in terms of just seeing these 10-plus targets like he did every single week last year when him and Dak were both healthy and out there. So Amari is inside my top 10. His ADP is like wide receiver 14. I love getting him when I can as my third overall pick. A.J. Brown closes it out. Brown would have been a top 6 guy, probably ahead of Metcalf for me if they didn't add Julio. That target share reduces in a run-first offense. So that's where you get around my top 10. Allen Robinson, stable production. Justin Jefferson, I'm a little bit lower than the market. I think they regress. He had a career year last year from Kirk Cousins, 8.2 yards per attempt. In terms of his efficiency, I think they try and run the ball a little bit more, even more than they did last year since they got Christian Darrisaw. I think the whole offense in general becomes less efficient. And that tier 2 then rounds out with 14 and 15 in my wide receiver ranks, and it's the Rams guys. I prefer Kupp barely, as you can see, over Robert Woods. I think Woods maybe plays more snaps in general. I think Kupp has a better red zone presence. You see, just in general, the middle of the field slot receivers is something that's Matthew Stafford, whether it was when he had the Golden Tates of the world who had big years. And if you can just think back when he had some bigger receivers in there, even smaller guys like Brandon Powell for a little bit of a stretch in fantasy with the Lions was relevant because Matthew Stafford enjoys targeting the slot. TJ Hawkinson started coming alive last year in the slot for Matthew Stafford. So I do like Cooper Kupp. There's other reasons as well to that. He's been top 5 in yards after the catch the last couple of seasons. He's just a monster when it comes to creating more points for himself. And now he has a more accurate quarterback who can actually hit him, especially in the red zone. So that's tier 2. It goes to wide receiver 15. Now, tier 3 is going to start off here, and it's a big tier again, 16 to 27, over 10 guys in this tier. Again, that means that number 27 all the way at the bottom, Adam Thielen, could easily be number 16 for me, but I can't really see much higher than that based on my projections right now. But number 16 for me is Deontay Johnson, and I love what I've seen in the preseason through 2 games so far as of this recording. Deontay Johnson has stayed on the field in every single 2 wide receiver set, which you might see more of, meaning 2 tight ends on the field, which is a more run-first offense. Now that the Steelers have a running back, now that they drafted a second-round tight end out of Penn State who can block and catch, you might see more of these 2 tight end sets with Pat Freiermuth, the rookie, out of Penn State, and Eric Ebron. And then if that's the case, a wide receiver comes off the field. And right now, a guy who has not come off the field in the preseason starter staffs is Deontay Johnson. There's already a guy who wins in the intermediate routes, but he had drops last year. Odell Beckham Jr. led the league in drops 2 years ago. And there's no concerns about Odell Beckham Jr. having a drop problem, right? It's a not sticky stat moving forward. So Deontay Johnson, I'm not worried about that. He can win down the field as well. We've just seen the short to intermediate range because that was their offense last year with Deontay Johnson, but he can win at all levels of the field. I like him a lot. We go down. Tyler Lockett is, spike weeks, but just continues to be a consistent receiver. Was a top 10 receiver in some formats, PPR last year. I got him at 18 here. And now as I keep going down, there's the Bucs receivers. Number 17, Godwin. Number 20, Mike Evans. I'm below the field on both of them. I never get either of these guys. Like an underdog, I don't know if I have a single share. Mike Evans goes often as like a top 15, borderline top 10 receiver. I don't buy it. I mean, last year when Antonio Brown was there, Mike Evans was, for the most part, surviving. He had literally one game where it was into the fourth quarter, 2 catches, 2 targets, 2 touchdowns, just 1-yard touchdowns. He's a big-bodied receiver. He's been fantastic. 7 straight years with 1,000-plus yards. He's amazing, right? He's still somewhat young, which is incredible to believe that he's still in his 20s after being in the league dominating for 7 years right after his rookie campaign where he broke out. And I think he's solid. He's a top 20 receiver right there at number 20 for me. I just can't get on the top 12 hype of Mike Evans now that Antonio Brown was there. Mike Evans was 3rd on this team basically in target share once Antonio Brown came last year, and he was surviving off touchdowns, which for a guy who last year and Tom Brady led the entire league in attempts in the second half of the year and overall passing touchdowns, all this stuff, I'm just not going to bank on that happening again. I know that Brady's never going to fall off, but I'm just not going to bank on that happening again with an older quarterback. And as you get past my 20 to now 27, there's some interesting names in here. Like DJ Moore, I really don't have a stance on. He's number 21 there. I like Terrace Marshall, scored touchdowns. McCaffrey's there, going to pick up a lot of yards. So if anything, I usually pass on DJ Moore. Sam Darnold's there now, more connection with Robbie Anderson, who even knows what Sam Darnold looks like. So if anything, I usually pass DJ Moore, but no strong stance in terms of hating him or liking him. T. Higgins is here at number 22, my number 1 ranked Bengals receiver. Normally, you're seeing Jamar Chase go ahead of him. Now there's some murmurs in camp that Chase is struggling, who didn't play in college last year, so that makes some sense to get acclimated to now NFL caliber players every single time you're out there taking reps. But people want to project the Jamar Chase top 20 receiver as the automatic breakout now, but T. Higgins already did it last year, and he did it towards the end of the year even without Joe Burrow in 6 of those games. So T. Higgins is my number 22, another second-year player, and Brandon Ayuk, who's just going to dominate. Look, if Trey Lance takes over, that's going to be a concern for the whole offense. I think Ayuk is the best pass catcher on this team, ahead of Debo, yes, ahead of Kittle, just in terms of overall pass-catching weapon. He was dominant in the short and the intermediate. They schemed for him, yards after the catch monster. That's why he was drafted there last year in the first round, traded up for by the San Francisco 49ers. Ayuk was amazing. He won in man coverage over 85% of the time last year, which puts him in one of the elite upper echelon tiers as a rookie. Jerry Jeudy at 24, I prefer over Cortland Sutton. We'll see where I have Sutton ranked later. Odell, Jamar Chase, who we just talked about, and Adam Thielen is down here. So Odell I like, and he's only wide receiver 25 for me. He usually goes off the board around that range, maybe a little bit later. I like him a lot. You saw last year in the second half of the year, Baker really start clicking in this offense. And no, it wasn't because Odell wasn't there. Don't be ridiculous. It's because they started to actually click. They got Nick Chubb back. They were getting the play action rolling. They ended up having some key contributors. Jarvis Landry started to ball out. Donovan Peoples-Jones made a name for himself in a couple of games last year. You now insert Odell into that, and he looks apparently healthier than ever coming off of an ACL tear, and I like that a lot as a top 25 receiver. Usually if I can get Odell in the 5th or 6th round, I feel fantastic about that as my wide receiver 2 or 3. Usually my wide receiver 3, it feels great. So that's where I'm usually ending up my tier 3. My wide receiver 27 gets me to. We're a little over halfway through. We got 51 guys that take us through 5 tiers. We had 7 for running backs. It's easier to break them apart compared to their workloads versus receivers who have similar somewhat ceilings and floors depending on if they're wide receiver 1, 2, or 3 in their offense. If you're still watching, you want to hit the like button, I greatly appreciate that. We're in the Mecca right now, a couple weeks away from the NFL season. We're creating preseason content for DFS and betting. If that's your thing, I urge you to check it out. Even if it's not, you're going to have a massive leg up on competition, knowing the depth charts of these teams and exactly who these players are. And then we're also doing season-long content every day, so you can check out also the Fantasy Football 2021 playlist. So here's tier 4. And tier 4 at the top of it, I really like some of these names. Like Kenny Golladay, you can get in the 6th round. And he's already dealing with a hamstring. And people are going to say, oh, he's injury prone. Last year, it was pretty evident and obvious that he wasn't really injured with that groin, but he was in a contract year, and why go out there and play for the Detroit Lions, who I'm sure he talked with Matthew Stafford, and he was probably like, yeah, I'm out of here too after this year. So it was pretty evident that it was one of those cough, AJ Green style, I'm not playing this year, I'm too quote-unquote hurt. Joe Mixon did something similar last year. Bad Bengals team, no Joe Burrow. Why are we trotting out there Joe Mixon every day if there's really no upside for him or this offense? If he's out there, it's only downside of him re-injuring himself. But the hamstring injury in camp is a concern. They said he should be ready for week 1, so he does bump down a little bit, but this is a guy who was a top 6 wide receiver in fantasy 2 years ago. He was being drafted as a top 10 guy. He was ranked number 6 for me last year. So if you want to find the Stephon Diggs guy who goes in the 5th or 6th round this year, who can finish top 10, maybe not number 1 overall in fantasy points, but top 10, yeah, that would be Kenny Golladay. And there's concerns, of course, with Daniel Jones and who he is and what the offensive line is and what Saquon back, are they going to run more? What all this stuff, right? But at this point, all that's kind of baked into this price. Chase Claypool at 29, massive ceiling. The concern is if they go more to two wide receivers, to spit it out, 2 wide receiver sets, you get a lot less Chase Claypool in the field, and that's a concern. But the domination that this guy had as a rookie was very similar to DK Metcalf, running a lot of go routes down the field. Then towards the end of the year, they started to put more into his playbook, using him in the red zone on these end-arounds, creative plays. We like to see that, but now if they go more run first and he's on the field less, that's the concern. So he's top 30 for me, and he can really make that leap this year to where DK is going as like a top 10 guy if he can just stay on the field. We continue to go down here. You can see Juju. It's the opposite or the exact same analysis as Chase Claypool. Juju was great last year. I mean, he was towards the second half of the season, he was balling out. Red zone targets, yards after the catch guy. He was solid. And now if Big Ben's another year removed from the shoulder, he could be good. But Juju, a more traditional slot receiver, if they run more 2 tight end sets, comes off the field more this year. So I actually like Juju at where he's going. I see the concerns, but I think they're already baked into the price. I get Juju a lot as like my wide receiver 3 or 4 in like the 7th round here. And that's pretty solid. We are now towards this end of tier 4, 33 to 40 here. And a couple of names I'll point out. I've talked about Antonio Brown, led this team when he actually came to them midway through last year in targets and target share, but he's going 6 rounds later than Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. I'll just take Antonio Brown later. There's way more value, and I think he has an equal chance to be a higher, ended up at the end of the year, he might be a top 15 receiver, and those guys are behind him. There's no doubts in my mind that can happen. I mean, just look what he did in week 17 last year. Over 100 yards, 2 tutties. Is by far dominating still. He sat out a year. He's one of the best in-shape 30-plus-year-olds you'll ever find. And another in-shape 30-plus-year-old is Marvin Jones, who I've been on the Marvin Jones train now for months. Basically, since he signed with this team for $9 million guaranteed, 2 years, $14.5 million, to reconnect with Darren Bevel from Detroit, who he played with. I thought he was a wide receiver 1 right when he came in. Laviska Shenault as a rookie showed me nothing to be a wide receiver 1 out of the slot last year. I mean, it was just a fine season. DJ Shark showed me nothing ever in his career. Like, he had a good 2-3 game stretch 2 years ago. Now he has a broken hand. Marvin Jones continues to show me stuff. 4 of the last 6 years, 100 targets, and he had a couple of those years end early with injuries. 3 out of the last 4 years, 9 touchdowns. All he does is get targeted and score touchdowns and make difficult contested catches. And in the preseason, he ran 11 routes in the first game, and he had 4 targets from Trevor Lawrence, 3 catches over 50 yards. This is the wide receiver 1 on the team, but he's being drafted outside the top 50 receivers, and the other 2 guys in Laviska Shenault, who people are just getting all hyped about his athleticism, even though he's going to be a slot low A guy, and then DJ Shark, who's not that great of an athlete, really hasn't shown much in the NFL. They're getting all hyped over those guys instead. No. Get Marvin Jones, my wide receiver 35. He goes in the 10th round. Now, after what he did in the preseason, moving up a little bit, 8th and 9th round. I've had him as like a 7th round value. Now, I've been fortunate to be able to take him and wait a little bit later on, but this is a fantastic pick. Take Marvin Jones as a tier 4, number 35 right now, wide receiver for me. And the rest of this tier is just guys I don't know really what to do with, but I like their talent. I just don't really like their situation, like Cortland Sutton. I think Jerry Jeudy has better upside just in terms of the routes he'll be running. The ideas of Teddy Bridgewater and Drew Lock getting the ball. I honestly hope Drew Lock's starting because he at least goes YOLO and throws the ball downfield a little bit more, like you saw in the preseason 80-yard bomb to KJ Hamler. But Sutton, I don't know what to do. 36 is definitely low by many people's standards. But that's just where I'm at right now. I prefer the other guys over him coming off of an ACL injury and what is going to likely be an offensive line that's banged up and a bad quarterback behind center. Curtis Samuel, they said he could play if he wanted to today. He looks to be the wide receiver 2 in this offense for Fitzpatrick. That's fine. There's going to be definitely a running game involved here. McKissick, Gibson out of the backfield. So he's fine where he's at. I think Tyler Boyd, I might be low on at 38 here, especially if Jamar Chase does struggle. It's just getting him above other guys is difficult for me. If you wanted to put Tyler Boyd as like wide receiver 32, that's why he's in the same tier as the guy who's wide receiver 32. Go for it. I mean, he continues to be consistent. He'll work out of the slot. Burrow, if anything, will rely on the slot a little bit more, like he did in college a ton with Justin Jefferson, who just saw over 1,100 yards, over 100 targets in that 2019 LSU championship season. So you can definitely move up Tyler Boyd. Jarvis Landry's there as Mr. Consistent just every single year. He's one of the safest guys you'll find in the league because he gets red zone targets. He gets just 7-8 targets a game. He puts up a couple weeks a year of 20 plus fantasy points, and he always usually pays off his prices like a wide receiver 3, right around where we have him. Shark to end up tier 4 is only going to continue to drop for me. Finger surgery, not working with the rookie, getting in camp because of this hand surgery, probably not going to play much in the preseason, getting just ragged on by the head coach and Urban Meyer at this point. He's quickly falling down boards for me. And like I said, he's had like a 2 to 3 week stretch when there's nobody else on the team 2 years ago where he showed some sort of production. I'm really not that interested in DJ Shark. So the final tier is going to be 41 to 51. Before we get into it, again, just check out the Supreme Draft Guide down below. If you want these tiers, and they go all the way down, I have 125 receivers ranked for a redraft. I have 50 tight ends. I have 50 quarterbacks. Yes, 50 quarterbacks, 91 running backs, all that stuff broken up into tiers, broken into a top 200, PPR, non-PPR, and a lot of other things, player profiles to get you all prepared for this year's draft. Check it all out down below. I put a lot of work, 500 hours around there is what it took last year, expecting that this year to create it and maintain it. So you don't have to worry about it being, okay, do I have to do all this work? It's already done for you. And it's all combed through and updated often every single day, really. It's all the work that I've done. So let me do the work for you. You can check it out down below. So tier 5 right now starts off with Corey Davis, who I think Corey Davis can finish as a top 25 receiver, especially if Elijah Warren is banged up, but they signed this guy in the open market, made the second most money behind Kenny Golladay, both guys going to the New York market. Had a breakout year last year where he dominated in 2 wide receiver sets. Now in the Jets' 3 wide receiver set scheme, which they're planning to run, Crowder in the slot, it could be interesting to see what he does, but he's having a great camp so far. And Corey Davis at this point, he's the wide receiver 1, the X on a team, and you get him outside the top 40 picks. That's great because a lot of guys here, like Tyler Boyd's a wide receiver 3 on a team, and I have him ranked ahead of him, right? That might be a mistake. There's guys behind him that are wide receiver 2s on his team or in a really bad offense. And Corey Davis is wide receiver 1. So I'll take him. He goes outside the top 50. I'll take him at 41. Mike Williams, a wide receiver 2, again, getting a lot of hype in what should be a good offense. Has the upside for downfield touchdowns and yardage. We've seen the 1,000-yard season. We've seen the 10-plus touchdown season. Maybe it all comes together this year if he can stay healthy. Brandon Cooks, who's the quarterback, even if it is Tyrod Taylor. I mean, Brandon Cooks, wide receiver 1, going to be the X, can move into the slot. Had a great year last year with Deshaun Watson. But this guy's going to push for 8 to 10 targets a game. I mean, you might see Brandon Cooks this year have a 140 to 150 target season. Even if it's Tyrod Taylor and Davis Mills, that's still good for a top 45 wide receiver finish. That's where I have him at right now. Michael Pittman, for me, recently moved up to wide receiver 44 because Carson Wentz are expecting to be back sooner. He's on the positive side is the current news that we have. But either way, don't let him fall outside the top 50 receivers. Again, a number 1 receiver practicing as the X in camp. T.Y. Hilton's older, going to be used as a guy who just goes downfield. Campbell in the middle of the field doesn't play on 2 wide receiver sets when they want to run the ball more with 2 tight ends on the field where Pittman will be there. He got unlucky last year when it came to just overall touchdowns based on his red zone usage. 44 for me is good. Debo's a name that you probably see often inside the top 40, maybe even the top 35. I don't like Debo at all. Look, this is going to be an offense where it's run first. They want to run the ball. They traded up for Trey Sermon, handpicked by Kyle Shanahan. They have George Kittle healthy. They have Brandon Ayuk healthy. This is the 3rd passing option in a heavy run first offense. And oh yeah, when and if Trey Lance takes over to begin the year, middle of the year, whatever it might be, now you have a rookie quarterback who's mobile. How is he going to sustain the George Kittles, the Brandon Ayuks, and the Debos? When Debo is the 3rd best pass catcher on his team, he's the odd man out there. I have him all the way down. I like him. Last year I liked him a lot. I had him in a lot of leagues. He couldn't stay healthy. But now I just don't want anything to do with him based on their current situation. And now we have these final couple of guys who, again, all look similar to me. I think Devontae Parker could be the wide receiver one on Miami, right? He's going to be out there week 1. Will Fuller won't be. The rookie Jalen Waddle in the slot, Devontae Parker on the outside. I think people are disrespecting him. I'm higher than consensus. Darnell Mooney, more people are coming on to, and I like Darnell Mooney a couple months back. I got a lot of him in best ball, and now he's going as like a top 70 pick. I just don't get as much Darnell Mooney now. It's no hate on Mooney. Again, all the reasons you love him, I love him too. I'm aware of all of them. This is a guy last year who just had no accurate targets thrown his way from all the quarterbacks, right? And now if Andy Dalton's starting, that's probably not going to happen again. But the GM said, what gives you hope, when the interviewers asked him last year at the end of camp, basically, or the end of the season? He said, Darnell Mooney gives me hope. Darnell Mooney had a great year as a rookie. It's like a 5th-round rookie last year. I like him a lot. But again, it's a similar situation. When and if Justin Fields takes over, this is going to be a mobile quarterback with Allen Robinson there for the number 1 option, with Cole Kmet in the short to intermediate range. It's just hard for him to really break out. Can he finish 47, 45, 40 like I have him here? Yeah, that's why he's in the same tier. Do I think he really has the upside to finish as a top 25 receiver? I think it takes an Allen Robinson injury, and I'm just not going to project that in, and knock on wood that it doesn't happen for Penn State's own A-Rob. And then to close out here are some guys either on new teams, going into new roles, whatever it might be. Devonta Smith, the rookie, doesn't have all of his preseason in camp, so that concerns me. I'm not even that big of a believer in him. Maybe not his talent, more so himself. I know the size narrative is out there, but I'm not a believer in Jalen Hurts. I don't think Devonta Smith could be a number 1 alpha wide receiver on an NFL team. If I'm wrong, I'm happy to swallow that. I like players. I just don't like where they go drafted. So he's my wide receiver 48. I really don't have any of him. And then you can go down, McCole Hardman. McCole Hardman's a concern. People are drafting him as like a top 40 wide receiver right now because he's in the Chiefs offense. And just like we saw last year, he didn't play in 2 wide receiver sets in the preseason games we've seen so far, meaning that he's only going to be on the field in 3 wide receiver sets as a slot guy, and he did not run any downfield routes. Now, I do think that will change. They're saying it's going to change in camp, but I'd be a little bit concerned. I get it. Attached to Patrick Mahomes as maybe the number 2 receiver. They just had this rotation of receivers in there. I mean, Marcus Kemp, Byron Pringle, DeMarcus Robinson. They drafted Cornell Powell. Right? You have all these guys, Chad Williams. We'll see who makes the team. It's just a rotation of receivers here, in my opinion, because you have the main receivers, Tyreek, Travis Kelce, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire in this team already. So Hardman, for me, I'm definitely lower on. And to close out our tier 5 is Cole Beasley. I know he's saying some stuff on Twitter that he might not play this season, whatever it might be, but this is a top 5 offense in the NFL, and this is a guy who's the number 2 receiver in that offense with heavy red zone usage. I like Cole Beasley a good amount. Now, before we close it up, you're probably like, where's this guy? Where's this guy? I'll give you some of the just missed, right? Just missed guys. So my tier 6 starts off with Elijah Moore, Terrace Marshall. Love Terrace Marshall. It's just getting him into the top 50 is tough, but love Terrace Marshall. Number 3 receiver on his team that has Christian McCaffrey, so really the number 4. It's tough, you know? Elijah Moore, a camp injury, the most hyped guy ever because he's in the biggest market in New York for news. Just one of the most hyped guys you're going to find with a rookie quarterback who, yes, an improved offensive line, but we have to still see it out there first, who just invested in Corey Davis, who just invested in Keelan Cole, who has Crowder. There's a lot of things that halt him from being a top 50 receiver like he's going as before this injury. Henry Ruggs, I think, can maybe take a step forward. And Laviska Shenault, who I don't know why people are so high on Laviska Shenault. I get it. He's an athletic freak and an athletic monster. But where's the ball going to go to him? He only plays in the slot. He plays in the slot, and unless people think he's going to take this Chris Godwin, Tyler Boyd type leap this year, I mean, again, I'll admit that I was wrong on him. But as of right now, I'm not drafting him as a top 40 receiver like he's going in drafts on best ball right now and on Underdog. So, no, not for me. Those are the guys who just miss. But thank you for tuning in. These are basically top 51. We kind of covered 55 receivers in my top 5 to 6 tiers. You can check out all those tiers down below in the Supreme Draft Kit. Limited time offer to get it for free, F-R-E-E, free, down below. Any questions at all, reach out to me on Twitter. Follow me on TikTok. We got TikToks going out every day as well. I'm very responsive over there. And if you're still watching, let me know in the comments, who's your favorite receiver right now that you can basically get outside the top 5 to 6 rounds of drafts that you're targeting a lot? Let me know in the comments section. Appreciate you tuning in, and we'll see you all in the next one. Check out that running back tiers video as well if you have not yet already. Top 50 running backs rankings and tiers. Peace out, gang. The season is less than 3 weeks away, and I cannot wait.